My name is Isaiah. I am 68 years old. I am a retired logistics foreman. The police called. Your missing daughter has been found. We need someone to come and confirm her identity. I said I only have one son. I do not have a daughter. They insisted, please come in or we will come get you. As I walked into the station, the woman I saw left me stunned. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps this old man share his truth. Let me know in the comments what city you are watching from and what time it is right now. I always try to read every single one. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray, overcast day we get a lot of here in the south side of Chicago. I was sitting in my living room, the same house I have lived in for 40 years. It is not a mansion, but it is paid for and it is clean. I was doing what I do every Tuesday. I was polishing the silver frame of the photograph that sits on the mantelpiece. It is the best picture I have of Bernice, my late wife. She has been gone for 10 years now, but looking at her smile still brings a warmth to my chest that this empty house cannot provide. I was just wiping a speck of dust from the glass, whispering a quiet hello to her, when the phone rang. It was not a cell phone ring, but the harsh mechanical trill of the landline I keep for emergencies. I picked it up expecting a telemarketer. Instead, a voice cold as steel greeted me. It was an officer from the 4th District. He did not waste time with pleasantries. He told me they had found a young female in a raid on a squatter's building a few miles east of here, and she had identified me as her father. I frowned, gripping the phone tighter. I told him he had made a mistake. I told him clearly that I have one child, a son named Andre, who is 38 years old and lives in Naperville. I told him my wife passed a decade ago and there are no other children. I was ready to hang up thinking this was some cruel prank or a scam targeting seniors. But the officer did not back down. His voice dropped an octave, becoming more serious. He said the girl had a birth certificate with my last name. He said she was terrified, refusing to speak to anyone else, claiming I was the only person in the world she could trust. He told me that if I did not come down to identify her immediately, she would be processed into the state foster care system as a Jane Doe. The threat hung in the air. I am a man who respects the law. I worked 40 years on the loading docks, managing crews, ensuring every crate was accounted for. I do not leave things unresolved. If someone was using my name, I needed to clear it. I told him I was on my way. I hung up and grabbed my keys. My hands were shaking just a little. I looked back at Bernice's photo one last time before walking out the door. I told her I would be right back. I climbed into my 2004 Ford F-150. The engine roared to life with a familiar rumble that usually calmed me, but today my heart was beating faster than the pistons. As I drove through the familiar streets of the South Side, past the boarded-up windows and the corner stores, my mind was racing. Could Andre have a secret? No, that was impossible. Andre is a CFO. He is obsessed with his image. He and his wife Courtney are the perfect couple, always posting photos of their vacations and charity galas. They don't have secrets. They have public relations strategies. And they certainly don't have children. I remembered the pain in Andre's voice 16 years ago when he called me from the hospital to tell me the baby had died during delivery. A little girl. They had cremated her before I could even see the body. That grief had broken Bernice. It was the beginning of her end. So who was this girl at the police station? Was it a hustle? Was someone trying to extort money from an old man they thought was vulnerable? By the time I pulled into the precinct parking lot, I felt a mix of anxiety and anger. I hate police stations. They smell like stale coffee and misery. I walked up the concrete steps, smoothing down my jacket. I wanted to look presentable. I wanted them to know they were dealing with a man of dignity, not just another number in their system. I gave my name at the desk. The sergeant looked at me with eyes that had seen too much, then buzzed me through. He led me down a long, flickering hallway to an observation room. It was small and cramped. He pointed to the one-way glass that looked into an interrogation room. "That is her," he said. I stepped closer to the glass, squinting. The girl sitting at the metal table was a wreck. She looked about 16. She was wearing a dirty, oversized hoodie that looked like it had been pulled out of a dumpster. Her jeans were torn, not in the fashionable way, but from wear and tear. Her hair was matted. She was hugging herself, rocking back and forth slightly. My anger flared up. This was clearly some runaway trying to game the system. She looked nothing like me. She looked nothing like Andre. Then the officer inside the room said something to her, and she lifted her head. My breath hitched in my throat. The world seemed to stop spinning. The anger drained out of me, replaced by a cold shock that started in my toes and froze my heart. It was the eyes. Large, expressive, almond-shaped eyes. I had looked into those eyes every day for 35 years. They were Bernice's eyes. And then I saw it. On the side of her neck, just below her ear, was a birthmark shaped exactly like a maple leaf. Bernice had that mark. Andre did not inherit it, but this girl had it. I felt my knees buckle. I reached out and touched the cold glass. It was like looking at a ghost of my wife from her teenage years, stripped of all happiness and covered in the grime of the streets. "Open the door," I commanded. My voice sounded strange, raspy, and distant. The officer hesitated, but he swiped his card. I walked into the interrogation room. The air inside smelled of fear and unwashed clothes. The girl flinched when the door opened, curling tighter into a ball. She looked up at me, terror in those familiar eyes. She studied my face, searching for something. Then her lips trembled. She whispered a single word that shattered my reality into a million jagged pieces. "Grandpa," I stood frozen. She continued, her voice barely a squeak. "Daddy told me you were dead. He said you died a long time ago." I stared at her. The room spun. This was not a stranger. This was not a scam. This was the granddaughter I had grieved for 16 years ago. This was Jasmine. The baby Andre told me had died at birth. The baby Bernice had wept for until her own heart gave out. She was alive. She had been here in this city, suffering in the shadow, while my son lived in a mansion. I looked at this fragile, broken child, and in that moment, the grief of 16 years turned into a rage so hot it could have melted the steel bars of that cell. My son had not just lied to me, he had stolen a life, and I was going to make him pay. As I sat in that cold interrogation room staring at Jasmine, my mind was pulled violently back 16 years into the past. It was like a movie reel playing in reverse, showing me the foundation of lies my life had been built upon. I remembered the day Andre married Courtney. She was a striking woman, ambitious and sharp, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me or Bernice. But Andre loved her, and that was enough for us. When they announced Courtney was pregnant, the joy in our house was explosive. Bernice, my sweet. Bernice had waited her whole life to be a grandmother. She spent months knitting blankets. I remember the sound of her humming in the kitchen, holding up tiny yellow booties, her face glowing with a happiness I had not seen in years. I spent my weekends driving to their apartment, helping them set up the nursery. I painted the walls a soft cream color. I assembled the crib with my own hands, tightening every screw, making sure it was sturdy enough to hold the most precious thing in our world. We were ready. We were so ready to love this child. Then came the phone call that destroyed us. It was a rainy Tuesday. Andre's voice was broken, choked with sobs. He told me there had been complications. The umbilical cord, he said. It was wrapped around her neck. She didn't make it, Dad. She is gone. The words hit me like a physical blow, but they destroyed Bernice. We rushed to the hospital, but we were stopped at the door. Courtney was too distraught to see anyone, they said. And the baby, they said it was best we remembered her as a dream, not a tragedy. The funeral was a blur of gray skies and black umbrellas. There was a tiny white casket, barely big enough for a doll. It was closed. Andre insisted it remain closed. He said Courtney could not bear to see the baby again. We stood there weeping over an empty box. We cried over a lie. Bernice never recovered. The light went out of her eyes that day. She stopped humming. She stopped eating. The grief ate her alive from the inside out. 2 years later, her heart just stopped. The doctors called it cardiac arrest, but I knew the truth. She died of a broken heart. She died mourning a granddaughter who was actually alive, breathing, and suffering just a few miles away. After Bernice passed, I poured everything I had into Andre. He was all I had left, the only piece of Bernice remaining on this earth. I have worked at the logistics terminal for 40 years. I started as a crate loader and worked my way up to foreman. It is hard, back-breaking work. I have spent thousands of nights shivering on the docks, checking manifests under flickering floodlights, while the wind off Lake Michigan cut through my coat. My hands are calloused and scarred. My knees ache every time it rains. I did it all for him. I worked double shifts so Andre could go to the best universities. I wanted him to have soft hands. I wanted him to work in a climate-controlled office far away from the grit and the grime of the shipyard. When he told me he wanted to start his own investment firm, I did not hesitate. I had a piece of land down in Georgia inherited from my grandfather. It was my safety net, my retirement plan. I sold it. I took the check for $200,000 and I put it directly into Andre's hand. I remember the look on his face. He did not cry. He just nodded and said he would make me proud. I told him, "Son, this is your mother's legacy. Make it count." I kept nothing for myself. I continued to drive my old truck. I continued to live in our modest house in the South Side, clipping coupons and watching every penny. I believed in him. I trusted him with my life. I thought his success was my success. I thought that even though I was alone in that big, empty house, my sacrifice had meant something. I was the proud father of a successful man. I was a fool. While I was heating up canned soup for dinner, Andre and Courtney were building a fortress in Naperville. They bought a mansion that looks like something out of a magazine. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a heated garage for their luxury cars. I have seen the pictures on social media. Courtney loves to post about their life. She writes captions about blessings and hard work. She posts photos of their immaculate white living room, their trips to Europe, their charity galas, where they smile for the cameras holding glasses of champagne. They built a paradise on the foundation of my sweat and my wife's grief. But there was always a distance, a wall I could not climb. In the last few years, I have barely seen them. I would call and ask to visit, and Courtney would always have an excuse. "Oh, Isaiah, we have a fundraiser this weekend." "Oh, Dad, the house is being renovated." Or the most hurtful one, "We are having friends over from the club, and you know you would be bored. You do not have much in common with our circle." She made me feel small. She made me feel like my presence was a stain on their perfect white carpet. I thought she was just snobbish. I thought she was ashamed of my rough hands and my blue-collar accent. I accepted it because I wanted peace. I stayed away to make them happy. I see now that it was never about embarrassment. It was about concealment. They did not keep me away because I was unpolished. They kept me away because they were terrified. They were terrified that one day I might see a shadow in the window. They were terrified that their perfect life was a house of cards sitting on top of a dungeon. They were not busy. They were guarding a secret. And as I sat in that interrogation room realizing the magnitude of their betrayal, the love I had for my son began to curdle into something dark and heavy. I was no longer just a father. I was a man who had been robbed of 16 years, and I was done being the victim. The silence in the interrogation room was heavy, broken only by the hum of the ventilation system and the soft hitching breaths of the girl who was rewriting my entire history. I sat across from Jasmine, my hands clasped tightly on the cold metal table to stop them from shaking. I needed to know everything. I asked her to tell me the truth, no matter how much it hurt. She took a sip of water from a styrofoam cup, her hands trembling so much they had to use both of them, and then she began to speak. Her voice was raspy, unused to being heard. She told me she didn't die. There was no cord wrapped around her neck. There was no medical emergency. The problem, she whispered, looking down at her scarred hands, was that she wasn't perfect. When she was born, the doctors noticed she was slow to respond. Later, it became clear she had severe dyslexia and a speech delay. For most parents, this would mean extra tutors, patience, and love. For Courtney, it was a disaster. Jasmine told me that she overheard her mother screaming at my son years ago, saying that she did not carry a child for 9 months, just to produce a defective product. Courtney was obsessed with appearances. She wanted a child she could show off at country clubs, a prodigy who would get into Ivy League preschools. She did not want a daughter who struggled to read or stuttered when she was nervous. She told Andre that having a special needs child would ruin their brand. It would make them look weak. It would be a burden they did not deserve. And my son, the man I raised to be strong, crumbled. He let her make the decision. Jasmine told me they paid off a corrupt doctor to sign a death certificate. But they didn't kill her. That would have been too messy. Instead, they erased her existence. When she was just a few weeks old, they handed her over to a man named Brad. Jasmine flinched when she said his name. Brad is Courtney's older brother. I had met him once at the wedding. He was a mean drunk with dead eyes who Courtney usually pretended didn't exist. They drove Jasmine to a crumbling tenement building in the worst part of the city and left her there. For 16 years, Jasmine lived in a damp, windowless basement. She was never sent to school. She never saw a doctor. Brad used her as a live-in servant. She cooked his meals, cleaned up his filth, and scrubbed the floors until her knees bled. If she missed a spot, or if she stuttered when she spoke to him, he would lock her in a closet for days without food. She showed me a scar on her arm where he had burned her with a cigarette because she dropped a plate. I felt bile rise in my throat. My granddaughter was living in hell while I was sitting alone in a quiet house mourning a ghost. She told me she finally ran away 2 nights ago because she overheard Brad on the phone. He had run up a gambling debt he couldn't pay, and he was arranging to sell her to a group of men who traffic girls. That was when she knew she had to leave or she would die. She climbed out of a ventilation shaft and ran until her feet blistered, finally collapsing near where the police found her. Just as I was struggling to process the sheer magnitude of this cruelty, the door opened and the lead detective walked in. He looked grim. He was carrying a thick file folder. He placed it on the table between us. He told me that when they raided Brad's apartment to look for evidence of trafficking, they found a safe. Inside that safe were documents that painted a picture even uglier than simple abandonment. I opened the file. My eyes scanned the papers, and my blood turned to ice. Andre and Courtney hadn't just discarded Jasmine like trash. They had monetized her. The documents showed that while Jasmine was legally dead to me and the rest of the world, she was very much alive on paper in the state of Delaware. Andre had set up a special needs trust fund in her name. They claimed she was living in a specialized full-time care facility that cost $10,000 a month. I flipped through the bank statements. Every month for 16 years, money from Andre's investment firm was transferred into this tax-exempt trust. It was a massive tax shelter. They were using my granddaughter's existence to hide millions of dollars from the IRS. But it got worse. There were withdrawal records. The money wasn't going to a facility. It wasn't buying medicine or therapy. It was being funneled into a shell company owned by Courtney. I saw the line items. Money meant for a disabled child was being spent on designer handbags, 5-star resort stays in the Maldives, and lease payments on a Porsche. I saw a withdrawal for $12,000 labeled medical equipment that coincided perfectly with the date Courtney posted a picture of a new diamond necklace on Instagram. They were receiving state disability checks for her too. Every month, the government sent a check to help a struggling child, and every month, Courtney cashed it to buy lunch at high-end restaurants. They were feasting on her suffering. They had turned their own daughter into a tax write-off and a piggy bank. The level of calculation was psychopathic. They didn't just hate her, they used her. They looked at this innocent girl and saw a profit margin. I closed the file. I felt a calm settle over me. It was not the calm of peace. It was the calm of a soldier before a battle. I looked at the detective and asked if I could make a call. He nodded. I pulled out my old flip phone and dialed Andre's number. It rang 4 times before he picked up. The background noise was loud, clinking glasses, soft jazz music, the chatter of a party. Hello, Andre's voice was smooth, confident. It is me, I said. Oh, Dad, hey. Listen, I can't really talk right now. We are just about to start the speeches. Is everything okay? I am at the 4th District Police Station. I said, my voice flat and hard. There was a pause. The background noise seemed to fade as he likely stepped away. What are you doing there? Are you hurt? I said. I am here with your daughter. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then came the panic, a nervous, high-pitched laugh. Dad, what are you talking about? You know our daughter died. You were at the funeral. You are confused. Who is there with you? Is someone trying to scam you? Put the officer on the phone. This is ridiculous. I did not raise my voice. I did not scream. I channeled 40 years of managing rough men on the docks. I channeled every ounce of authority I possessed. Cut the act, Andre. I have seen the girl. I have seen the birthmark. And I have seen the bank statements from the Delaware Trust Fund. I know about Brad. I know about everything. I heard him gasp. His breath was coming in short, sharp bursts. Dad, listen to me. It is not what you think. Courtney. She handled everything. You have to understand we had to do what was best for the family. Do not say anything to the cops. We can fix this. I can explain. You have exactly 45 minutes, I said. What, Dad? I can't leave. This is my gala. The mayor is here. My partners are here. I looked at Jasmine, who was watching me with wide, hopeful eyes. I looked at the scars on her arms. I do not care if the President of the United States is there, I said. You have 45 minutes to get your ass down to this station. If you are not here, I am not just talking to the police. I am coming to that hotel, and I am bringing the police, the press, and this file with me. and I will walk right up onto that stage and show the world exactly how you paid for that Porsche. Dad, please, you can't tick-tock Andre. I snapped the phone shut. I looked at the detective. I told him to get the paperwork ready. My son was coming to face the music. They arrived 40 minutes later. Andre walked in first, looking pale and sweating in his designer suit. But it was Courtney who sucked the air out of the room. She swept into that dingy police station like royalty visiting a leper colony. She was wearing a cream-colored trench coat that probably cost more than my truck, and her heels clicked sharply on the linoleum floor. Flanking them was a man carrying a briefcase, a lawyer who looked like a shark in a tie. Courtney did not run to Jasmine. She did not cry. She did not offer a hug. She barely even glanced at the terrified girl trembling in the corner. Instead, she turned her cold blue eyes onto me. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust, the way one looks at a senile dog that needs to be put down. "Oh, Isaiah," she sighed, shaking her head. "I told you, Andre. We should have put him in that home last year. He is getting worse." I stood up, my fists clenched at my sides. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Courtney turned to the lead detective, flashing a practiced, apologetic smile. "Officer, I am so sorry. My father-in-law wasted your time. He has been struggling with dementia for months now. He gets confused. He mixes up the past and the present." She pointed a manicured finger at Jasmine. "This poor girl is not our daughter. Our daughter died 16 years ago. This girl is the daughter of a housekeeper we fired for theft back in the day. She has a history of mental illness and delusions. She has been stalking our family for years, claiming to be our child. It is a sad, pathetic obsession." The lawyer stepped forward, slapping a document onto the table. "Here is the death certificate for Jasmine Dixon, dated 16 years ago. Signed, sealed, and filed with the county. And here is a restraining order we filed against this girl's mother. Unless you want a lawsuit for unlawful detention and harassment of a grieving family, I suggest you release this minor into our custody so we can get her the psychiatric help she clearly needs." The detective looked at the death certificate. It looked authentic. He looked at me, then at Andre, and finally at Jasmine. The law is a machine, and machines run on paperwork. I could see the hesitation in his eyes. Courtney was winning. She was rewriting reality with her confidence and her husband's money. She was gaslighting me, painting me as a senile old fool and Jasmine as a stalker. I looked at Andre. He refused to meet my gaze. He was staring at the floor, crumbling under his wife's shadow. I realized then that if I fought them right here, right now, I would lose. They would take Jasmine, and she would disappear forever. I needed to be smarter. I needed to play the game. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face fall into an expression of confusion. I rubbed my forehead with a trembling hand. Maybe you are right," I stammered, making my voice sound weak. "I have been forgetting things lately. The days blur together." Courtney's eyes gleamed with triumph. "See, he does not know what day it is. Come on, Andre. Let's get this girl to the clinic." I asked for one moment to say goodbye. Courtney rolled her eyes but nodded, checking her watch. I walked over to Jasmine. She looked at me with betrayal in her eyes, terrified that I was abandoning her. I pulled her into a hug, shielding her from their view with my broad back. "I am not leaving you," I whispered into her ear so low only she could hear. "Trust me. Keep this safe." I slipped a small burner phone into the deep pocket of her oversized hoodie. I had bought it from a bodega on the way to the station and fully charged with the location, tracking already turned on. I stepped back. "I am sorry," I said loudly. "I am just an old man." I watched them lead her away. Andre grabbed Jasmine's arm hard, his grip bruising. Courtney didn't even touch her. They marched her out to their black SUV. As they drove away, the detective looked at me with pity. "You should get some rest." "Mr. Dixon," he said. I didn't go home. I walked to my truck, climbed in, and pulled out my own phone. I opened the tracking app. The red dot representing Jasmine was moving west onto the highway. Then I made a call. I didn't call the police. I called the Union Hall. I have been a member of the Logistics and Longshoremen Union for 40 years. We are a brotherhood. We have built this city, and we know every back alley, every warehouse, and every secret it holds. I called my old friend Big Sal, a retired crane operator, who knows everyone from private investigators to heavy hitters. "Sal," I said, "I need the boys. I need a crew. Tonight." Within an hour, 4 trucks were idling in an empty lot near the highway. These were men with gray hair and bad backs, but they had hands like sledgehammers and loyalty that money couldn't buy. I told them everything. I told them about the granddaughter. I never knew the lies and where that red dot was heading. It wasn't going to the mansion in Naperville. It was heading deep into the rural outskirts towards a place called Serenity Ranch. I knew that place. It wasn't a clinic. It was a juvenile reform camp, notorious for abuse, a place where rich people sent their problem children to be broken. It was isolated, surrounded by woods and off the grid. We drove in a convoy, keeping our distance. The red dot stopped moving. We parked a mile out and moved in on foot. The woods were dark, but we knew how to move in the shadows. We had spent decades navigating dangerous shipping yards at night. We cut through the perimeter fence with bolt cutters. We crept up to the main administrative cabin. The lights were on. I could hear voices. I motioned for Sal to get the camera ready. We moved to the window, peering through the blinds. Jasmine was sitting on a wooden chair in the middle of the room. Courtney was pacing back and forth, holding a glass of wine she must have brought with her. Andre was sitting in the corner, head in his hands. Courtney was screaming. I pressed my phone against the glass to record the audio. "You ungrateful little brat," Courtney shrieked, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You think you can run to that old fool? You think anyone cares about you? You are nothing." She threw the wine glass against the wall. It shattered near Jasmine's head. Jasmine flinched, sobbing silently. "I should have choked you out myself 16 years ago," Courtney spat. "God, you are so ugly. You look just like your grandfather, and that whole side of the family. A little mongrel. That is all you are. You are not my daughter. You are just an ATM machine." My blood boiled, but I held steady. The camera was rolling. Courtney leaned into Jasmine's face. "Do you know how much money you made me? 200 grand a year in tax breaks, plus the state checks. You paid for my car. You paid for my vacations. You served your purpose by staying in that basement. But now you are a liability, and liabilities get liquidated." She turned to Andre. "Call the doctor. Tell him we need a sedation heavy enough to make sure she doesn't wake up until we get the transfer papers signed. We are shipping her out of the country tomorrow." Andre looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Courtney, please." "Shut up, Andre. Be a man for once in your life." That was it. That was the silver bullet. She had admitted to the fraud. She had admitted to the abuse. She had used a racial slur against her own child, and she had threatened to traffic her out of the country. I hit stop on the recording. I looked at Sal. He nodded. It was time to end this. 2 days later, Andre held his gala at the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel. It was a celebration of his promotion to vice president of the firm. The room was filled with the city's elite men in tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than my house. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a warm glow over the lies being told at every table. I walked through the double doors. I was not wearing a tuxedo. I was not wearing a suit. I wore my pressed blue work uniform, with my name Isaiah stitched over the pocket and my union pin on the collar. It was the uniform of an honest man, and it stood out like a beacon in that sea of silk and velvet. The room went quiet as I walked down the center aisle. Andre was on stage holding a glass of champagne freezing mid-toast. Courtney stood next to him, her smile faltering. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed into slits. She leaned into the microphone, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Security, please. My father-in-law is having an episode. Please escort him out gently before he hurts himself." 2 large guards started moving towards me. I did not stop. I walked straight to the audio-visual booth at the side of the stage. The young technician looked at me confused. I handed him my phone and the cable I had prepared. "Play it," I said. "Now." Courtney was shouting now. "Get this senile old man out of here. He is ruining the night." But it was too late. The massive screen behind them, which had been displaying charts of Andre's profits, suddenly flickered. The video from the cabin appeared. The audio boomed through the high-quality speakers, crisp and clear. Every person in that room heard Courtney's voice. They heard her call Jasmine a mongrel. They heard her admit to the fraud. They heard her threaten to traffic a child. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Courtney stood frozen, her face draining of all color. Andre dropped his champagne glass, the sound of shattering crystal echoing like a gunshot. The video ended, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence. Then the double doors burst open. But it wasn't security. It was Detective Miller and a squad of officers. I had given them the recording 2 hours ago. They marched down the aisle, the sound of their heavy boots drowning out the nervous murmurs of the crowd. They walked right up onto the stage. Andre tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. An officer spun him around and slapped the handcuffs on his wrists. The charge was grand larceny, tax fraud, and forgery. Courtney screamed. She actually screamed, stomping her foot like a petulant child. "No. You cannot touch me. Do you know who I am? This is a mistake. My husband did this. He forced me." She was thrashing as they cuffed her, her elegant facade completely crumbling to reveal the ugly, scared bully beneath. She was charged with child endangerment, kidnapping, and human trafficking. As they dragged them off the stage, they had to pass right by me. The guests parted like the Red Sea, staring in horror at the couple they had toasted moments ago. Andre stopped in front of me. He looked small. He looked weak. Tears were cutting tracks through his spray tan. He looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Dad, please. You have to help me. Call the lawyers. I am your son. Do not let them take me." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had sacrificed my back and my knees for. I looked for the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders, but he was gone. I let my face remain as hard as stone. "I do not have a son named Andre," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. "My son was a decent man. He died 16 years ago when he decided to sell his own child. You are just a monster who stole my last name." I turned my back on him and walked out of the hotel, leaving them to the justice they deserved. The courts gave me full custody of Jasmine within the week. The evidence was overwhelming, and with Andre's assets frozen and seized, their high-priced lawyers vanished. I took the remaining money in my savings account, every penny I had left, and I started renovations. I did not want her to live in a house full of ghosts. I went into the room that used to be Andre's. I stripped the wallpaper. I threw out the old trophies and the dusty pennants. I painted the walls a soft, warm pink, the color Jasmine chose herself. I bought a bed with the fluffiest comforter I could find. It has been 3 months now. It is not easy. Jasmine still has nightmares. Sometimes she wakes up screaming, thinking she is back in that basement. But we are working on it. She is seeing a therapist twice a week. She is learning to read with a specialist who understands her dyslexia. She is realizing that she is smart and kind and worthy of love. Yesterday evening, we were sitting on the front porch. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago sky in shades of purple and gold. The fireflies were just starting to come out. Jasmine was sitting on the swing next to me, reading a book out loud, stumbling over a few words, but keeping on. She stopped and closed the book. She laid her head on my knee. I stroked her hair, looking at the maple leaf birthmark that reminded me so much of Bernice. "Grandpa," she whispered. "Yeah, baby girl, I am home," she said. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, getting caught in the deep wrinkles of my face. I smiled a genuine smile that reached my eyes for the first time in years. "Yes," I said. "You are finally home. Don't ever let money or reputation blind you to what truly matters. Blood is not just about DNA, and being a father is not just about paying bills. A real father is the protector, the one who stands between his child and the cruelty of the world, even if that cruelty comes from within his own family." If you enjoyed seeing justice served to those who thought they were untouchable, please hit the like button and share this story. It helps more than you know. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow along as we share more stories of truth and redemption. I want to know, what time are you watching this video right now? Drop the time and your city in the comments below. I will be reading every single one of them.